Welcome to the SDP. I'm Kevin, the happy hipster. Ichigo? Ichigo? Oh, right, I forgot, it's the 19th. Change the scene!
Showa 86年7月19日、開発のわずか9ヶ月後に、カプコンは Nintendo 3DS のゲーム、6-3を完成されました。
Excuse me, wasn't this the exact same scene you did in the trailer for Season 1?
はい。
And you're still holding funerals for a cancelled video game?
正直毎日です。
What's that? Oh, right. Thank you, captions. And Ichigo, it's been over 2 years since Legends 3 was cancelled, and you're still going on about that?
気がさせていただきます。ください。
Dude, you need to move on.
ダッシュ3は売り物だか？
No, it's not a thing, yet.
カプコンは業界とダッシュ3を作るまで、俺は戦うでしょう。
Yes, well, perseverance is a good thing, but you can't become obsessed with any cause or else you'll despair over not seeing results faster than is feasible. I mean, it's just like trying to get a girlfriend. Boyfriend.
後の祭り絶望したカプコンが絶望した
It's a disgrace. Hey, I know what'll take your mind off that. I need a subject for my next review. You have any suggestions?
アニメか漫画の批評はどうかなそれは最強の批評以来長い方
So it is. I know, how about a comedy? Something that'll cheer you up.
どうも
Right. Now, it seems as if humor is different across all cultures, eh? I mean, look at the anime scene in Japan. There aren't many examples of comedy anime series I can think off the top of my head. As in good comedy series that rely on actual laughs instead of being bizarrely Japanese. Why do I keep limiting myself? Let's see. There's Ninja Nonsense, Excel Saga, pretty much everything else Nabashine's touched. I suppose you could make the case for Hotelier as well, although these are pretty obvious choices. Man, I feel like an anime dilettante. I need something with real hipster cred. Oh, Ichigo, repeat what you said 3 lines ago.
絶望したカプコンが絶望したでもなぜよ
Well, it turns out that's a catchphrase from a manga our viewers have probably never heard of. It's the manga and anime series Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei, and it's the subject of today's review. Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei, translated to Goodbye Mr. Despair, is a surreal dark comedy manga written by author Koji Kumeta, who, if his public persona is anything to go by, is awash in self-loathing. I'll start my review of his disavowed masterpiece by examining the first chapter. It begins with, of all things, our main character Nozomu Itoshiki having hung himself in a grove of sakura trees. Strange for a story to end before it gets started, no? Well, I guess that's where I end my review. This is Kevin, with Ichigo, and you are the Resistance.
Psych! Along comes the schoolgirl Kafka Fura, who saves Nozomu against his wishes. Being the nutcase she is, Kafka refuses to believe Nozomu was committing suicide, but rather making himself taller. Just like her father did, apparently. And then she starts naming things with blindly optimistic titles, even dubbing Nozomu the pink branch boss after the tree he hung himself from. This leads to a discussion about naming rights, in which Nozomu fears that at the rate things are going, even the national trademark Mount Fuji could be renamed to Mount Yahoo BB or some such.
This type of Seinfeldian conversation is a recurring storytelling device in this manga, and despite its tendencies to bring the plot to a screeching halt, here it is integral to the build-up of the punchline du jour. And besides, anything that can inspire us to make critical observations about our own world is alright in my book. But this would not be their only encounter.
It turns out that Kafka is a student in his high school class where we learn an unfortunate truth. The kanji in Nozomu's name, when written closely together, appear to form the word despair. See? Like that. Thusly, he has lived out his life in despair at everything around him. Kafka, on the other hand, is an unnaturally cheerful girl, always assuming that there's a happy explanation to all the unpleasantries going on around her, as discussed when she misinterpreted her teacher's suicide attempts. And then there's the other children in their class, including, but not limited to, Chirikitsu, the de facto class chairman. She suffers from some form of obsessive-compulsive disorder and is always demanding things to be done precise and properly. Kiri Komori, a hikikomori, that is, one who stays locked up in his or her room. After Nozomu and Kafka's intervention, she holes up in a room at the school instead. Matoi Tsunetsuki, a stalker who goes so deep into her super love obsessions, as Kafka puts it, that she copies the person's dress style, including Nozomu's old Taisho-era couture. Not kidding about that last part, I'll explain it later. Meru Otonashi, a shy girl who sends text messages instead of talking, specifically abusive and sarcastic text messages. Kaere Kimura, a blonde-haired exchange student from not Japan who is prone to panty shots, threatens lawsuits frequently as a result, and, under certain stress, switches personalities with the demure Japanese girl Kaede. Taro Maria Sekiyutsu, an illegal immigrant who purchased her name and class registration from a male bum who sold everything he had, and Nami Hito, the class's only normal girl. She is not pleased at her status.
And so on. Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei is one of those manga which, rather than keeping a consistent story arc, each of its chapters are standalone stories focusing on a particular topic. The best chapters are the ones early on, in which each topic is centered around the introduction of a particular character. Now, obviously they can't very well do that all the time, lest the cast reach Negima proportions, which is big. But as early in as the second volume, a predictable routine sets in.
A situation is set up and Nozomu complains about it. Someone from his class, usually Kafka, looks at the situation a different way. Some sort of bizarre conclusion is reached, having no bearing whatsoever on the following chapter. Sprinkle with cultural references to illustrate both arguments. The more Japanese, the better. Bake at 451 degrees Fahrenheit for 20 minutes. Serves 10 chapters per volume plus extras.
And yes, in case you couldn't tell, I seem to have gotten lost in my own metaphor.
But it's worth dealing with this routine to explore the world, this fractured take on 21st century Japan. In contrast with his students' contemporary uniforms, Nozomu always wears an old hakama and kimono ensemble dating back to the Taisho period, that is, the 1910s and 20s on the Gregorian calendar. The art style is heavily stylized, even by the standards of manga, as Kumeda-san seems dead set on avoiding shading wherever possible in favor of pure blacks and whites, primarily in his character designs. But that's not to say the series' art is devoid of detail. In fact, there are such a vast quantity of references that only a Japanese reader would get, regardless of language, that each book ends with a heaping helping of translator's notes, and even those can't cover all the details.
But far be it for Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei to rely solely on referential anecdotes. Seriously, is there any other kind? Which is good, because, as anyone who's suffered through a Seltzer and Freiberg movie knows, references are lazy writing.
There are puns aplenty to be found primarily in the characters' names. As can be expected with most other instances of foreign comedy, these tend to require sufficient knowledge of Japanese language concepts, like the different readings of kanji. Without such knowledge, you'll be scratching your head, or flipping to the translator's notes, for an explanation on certain gags, one noteworthy example being Chiri's sudden adoption of clairvoyant powers. Fortunately, a good chunk of the manga's humor revolves around the fourth wall, or rather the lack thereof. Characters often refer to one another in terms of their respective specialties, for example Kaere being the designated panty shot girl, and Nami being normal. In addition to the aforementioned translator notes, the manga volumes also pack in bonus features such as previews and or recaps which have nothing to do with the actual story. It's good stuff.
There is one issue that got me thinking, however, and that's Nozomu's repeated propensity towards attempting suicide. Now this comes from a culture which has a well-known association with the subject. I'm sure you're familiar with the rituals of seppuku and or harakiri, which were practiced very so often back in the day. Yep, made in Japan. Even today, in this post-war commerce-driven age, Japan continuously ranks among the top 10 countries for suicides. For example, the World Health Organization reports that ever since the mid-1990s, Japan experienced close to 30,000 suicides every year, having only last year dipped below that benchmark. So that makes me wonder, is it right to trivialize such a serious problem like Kumeda-san does in Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei? Because by playing suicide up for humor, he's not exactly portraying it in an undesirable manner. Then again, could Komeda-san's approach be not an endorsement of suicide, but a parody of such? Given the context of the series, this may be what the author had in mind. After all, if you read about a guy who sought to hang himself at the slightest provocation, real or imagined, surely you'd think that he was being unreasonable at least once or twice, no? This is a complex issue, and at times like these, I think back to the words of the great philosopher Basil Exposition.
I suggest you don't worry about this sort of thing and just enjoy yourself. That goes for you all, too. Yes.
You heard the man.
And it's totally worth leaving your reservations in the backseat, because Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei presents heaping helpings of hilarity to revel in. Yes, the sense of repetition creeps into the series the further you delve into it, but when it's good, it's nothing short of sublime. By not only breaking the fourth wall, but reaching out across it and sharing with the reader what he has learned about our world, Komeda-san has created a surrealist masterpiece. Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei scores 90%, an A-, and a Dragon Award. This comic is a must-read.
In case you haven't noticed, up until now I've been primarily referring to Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei as a manga series. Well, there was an anime produced as well, which ran for 3 half-seasons in Japan. The show was a product of Studio Shaft, and given their other works like Negima, Bakemonogatari, and Puella Magi Madoka Magica, you can imagine this is one bad mother...
Urusaya!
What, I'm just talking about Studio Shaft.
Sukiyo ne?
If you're finished with your contrived references...
The animated version of SZS keeps the bizarre flavor of the manga whilst adding its own clever touches, such as non-sequiturs on the classroom chalkboard, some guy's head used as a censor, and the uber-bizarre opening and ending themes. And perhaps for the prime example of Studio Shaft's nonsensory, there's this episode from Season 2. The chapter it's based on is a relatively straightforward one, straightforward by its own standards at least, about a guy who thinks he's Commodore Perry and goes around opening everything in the school, and I do mean everything. But for the anime, the dialogue was replaced by nonsense syllables, and the subtitles made the plot even more insane, if you can believe it, by telling some completely unrelated story about Goku finding the balls. In fact, it's so weird that the fansub group who tackled this episode added their own subtitles on top of that in order to match the manga's story. And since bringing up my not making this up disclaimer would only serve to clutter the screen even worse, just watch it for yourself.
There's just one problem. Media Blasters did license the series for North America, with the intention to release DVDs in May of 2010. Unfortunately, in the more than 3 years since, they still have yet to show up on the market, and the company has neither confirmed nor denied that any Region 1 videos will be put into production. That is until March of this year, when they announced that they had dropped a number of licenses, including Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei.
Kanashi no boku wa kanashii da.
Yes, well, maybe some other company's gonna license it. And maybe monkeys will fly out of my butt. Anyway, this is the reason why I focused my review of Sayonara Zetsubou Sensei on the manga instead. If an American video release were in the works, I'd need to know whether or not an English dub would be part of the deal, so I can include it in my judgment. Still, whether you're willing to wait for an official release or jump the gun and watch some fan subs, I unofficially bestow upon it another Dragon Award. This show is a must-see. This is Kevin, with Ichigo, and you are the Resistance. I don't always ask for subscribers, but when I do, it leaves me in despair. Stay thirsty, my friends.